And welcome back to a Hannity special, Generation Zero. Now, we watched the Obama administration increase the national debt by an unprecedented amount. Now, they say that they're doing this to get us out of the last financial crisis, but in doing so, could they be bringing about the next big one?
We have, it stands right now, a $12 trillion national debt, over $7 trillion in external debt or trade debt, almost $2 trillion federal budget deficit.
In 2009, the federal government is borrowing over $1.8 trillion. That comes to more than $150 billion a month. Next year, it'll be $1.4 trillion, and we're going to continue borrowing over $100 billion a month, over $1 trillion a year.
It doesn't take a PhD in economics to think that you can run $1 trillion, $2 trillion, $5 trillion, $10 trillion of debt.
These numbers are simply incomprehensible. They're so large.
The fiscal crunch can be dated fairly precisely. It's the year 2011. That is the year the first baby boomer turns 65 and qualifies for Medicare benefits.
The iceberg under the surface, I'm talking about the liabilities in the form of promises that we have made to people, particularly younger people today, that we will be able to pay them their Social Security, their pensions, and their health care for the rest of their lives, strongly subsidized by government, when we haven't the slightest ability to sustain and underwrite that funding without massive borrowing far beyond, orders of magnitude beyond what we can afford.
It means we would need to have somewhere in a bank $100 trillion right this minute earning interest. Now, the problem with that is the total national wealth of the United States, of the money that every single American has saved, added up, the value of every corporation, the value of every security, every stock, every bond. If you add all of that together, it only comes to just over $50 trillion. So we have promised twice the wealth of the entire United States to the elderly that will have to be paid one way or another.
All right, we continue now with Dave Bossie and Steve Bannon. Nothing gets me angrier than this: robbing the piggy banks of our children and our grandchildren. How long can we sustain $1.56 trillion in debt a year?
Sean, you and I both remember back in the 80s, everybody does. We used to say the debt that we're creating is going to be foisted on our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren. The debt today is now on us. It is not going away. It's getting bigger. $100 billion a month, it's unsustainable.
Here's the problem. If you look at this massive off-balance sheet liability we have with Social Security, Medicaid, and Medicare, $100 trillion. That's not even the worst entitlement program. What we have today, the worst entitlement program, is a political class that think they have a credit card that just continue to run up these deficits. And it's federal spending, it's the size of the deficit, and the size of the debt.
And that's what Barack Obama has done, I think, is really become the poster child for the debt. And that's what he's done, in my opinion, to energize the Tea Party movement and the conservative movement within this country, and why there's tremendous candidates, why there's a Christie, why there's a Scott Brown, why there's these folks around the country getting elected that normally wouldn't.
See, I agree. And the people that I talk to in the Tea Party movement, and the people that I've met, and the people that write me, and the people that call my radio program, they're concerned that this is going to be the first time ever in the history of this country that we hand off the country to them in worse shape than we received it. And people find that unconscionable.
It really is, and that's one of the things that that this film, I think, does so beautifully, is really crystallize that we, the living, there's this bridge between the folks who have gone before us, the dead, and the unborn, and it's a bridge. The generations are always supposed to give this country, because we are the greatest nation.
You know, it's funny, the Tea Party, because they're mocked as being stupid. They really get it, and what they get is that
anybody that's not a liberal by the liberal establishment is right.
You know what they get? This is a real crisis for our country.
They get it.
Not a manufactured crisis like global warming or the healthcare crisis. This is an existential crisis.
You know, for all the anger, and I had anger and frustration with Republicans. you know, because their spending was getting out of control, too. They were using money to keep their power.
Absolutely.
For as bad as they were, nobody would have anticipated that in 1 year Barack Obama would nearly quadruple the deficit spending and then raise it even more in a second year with trillion-dollar deficits as far as the eye can see.
And quadruple the money supply. I mean, look, this is a big problem. Look, this is a Republican and Democrat problem. The Republicans under George Bush spent out of control, and it's one of the reasons they got kicked out of power.
$400 billion to $1.43 trillion in 1 year.
The Republican Congress were spending, and it was horrible. And we became what we fought against in 1994, what we said we would do and fix, and we made a principled decision. And Newt Gingrich, for 4 years, balanced the budget, if people remember, 95, 90 to 99.
Sean, the other thing is the scale of this and how quickly it's moving. The deficit in President Obama's 2010 budget, the deficit is the size of federal spending under George Bush in 2001, about $1.8 trillion. I mean, the scale of this is just getting out of control. And even liberal economists are now starting to get concerned.
Look at what's happening in some of these European countries.
They're the canary in the mine shaft.
Yeah, they really are. Warning about what's about to happen. Coming up, a look at this generation's forgotten man who government policy is really punishing and how they will be harmed. And guess what? It's not the folks making over $250,000.
The forgotten man today is our children and grandchildren, because we're taking their money and we're leaving them with the debt. The grandparents are robbing the grandchildren. We're loading the debt on their shoulders and telling ourselves a little bedtime story that'll be all okay.